Hey, what's up, Trails Collective world? This is Ian here for the Trails Collective Live edition. This is airing April 6, 2022. I am stoked that spring is breaking. We had a 70-degree day here in Ithaca yesterday, about 60 today, and it just made it glorious. Nice jog, stroller, run with a little playground stop with my toddler, and truly nice to just have the weather breaking. So I'm excited for tonight's episode. It'll also be, as usual, a pretty full episode. We have several voices that will weave in here in the first half-hour block. We will have HollyAnn Swann reporting in on the Gorge Waterfalls 100K, a fairly high-profile race that just ran outside of Portland. We'll have Chris Rice, who just ran an event that was not on my radar prior in Long Island. So I'm excited to hear a little bit about that one. And then Riley Brady, who just ran Uber Endurance Sports Naked Prussian for the overall win this past weekend. After that, we will go into a kind of the going long part of tonight, and the topic will be spirituality and ultra, something which maybe isn't necessarily talked about enough, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's, I don't know, is what it is, I guess. But I think that trail and ultra for many of us is spiritual in our own ways. So I'm excited to dig in with some friends. Some I have known for some time. Mario Mendoza coming at us with us from Bend, Oregon, if he can catch us right after he finishes practice. Sabrina Little, who's run several iterations of Cayuga Trails over the years, including one of the years taking our national championship. In one of the years, we were the national championship 50 miler. And then also Michael Dubova, who I've gotten to know a little bit over these past 6 months. So I'm excited to dig in with each of those in that part of the episode. That'll kick off probably around like 8:30 or so. And we'll probably go an hour, hour and a half into that. If you are listening to us now, thank you so much for being live with us. This will also stream after the fact, and will be available as a podcast. So thank you, Ellie Pell, for your work there. And then if you would like to submit a comment or a question in any of the parts of this episode tonight, you'll have to drop it in onto the Trails Collective's Facebook live stream or the Trails Collective's YouTube feed. For some reason, and I still haven't stopped to figure it out, it doesn't come through in my personal feed. So head over to Trails Collective's Facebook page or the YouTube site and drop the comments there. All right, so I will give you just a few mentions here to start, and then we'll weave in HollyAnn in just a minute. So event mentions. Thanks so much to Thaddeus Nelson for reaching out to us with an event he's working on. It's the Greenbelt Trail Races, 25K, 50K relay run, and they have 50K relay in the mix as well, running Saturday, May 7th, using the northern portion of the Long Island Greenbelt Trail, and with proceeds benefiting Hope for the Warriors and the Greenbelt Trail Conference. You can check that out with registration being live on Run Sign Up and with the event coming right up. So check that out. And Thaddeus, thanks for giving us the heads up. On the Ultrasign Hot list, some events that are about to close out. For those of you who might be interested in buying your time, now would be the time. The Finger Lakes 50's 50 mile running July 2nd is 99% full. 25K, 50K already capped out. That is a classic, one of the oldest trail races in our region. And it's here outside of Ithaca in the Finger Lakes National Forest. Happily Running Shore to Shore 50K is running this weekend is 90% full. The Enchanted Forest 6-hour ultra running April 23rd in Stratford, Connecticut is 98% full. And Quest for the Crest VK 10K and 50K running May 21st, 22nd in Burnsville, North Carolina are 98% full. So check those out now before they close out. Podcast mentioned to the Culture crew coming out of Connecticut. It's Connecticut Ultra and Trail. They had episode 181. They had on Jason Hardrath, the king of FKTs and the experience leading up to 100 FKTs. And some of the experiences along the way. Pretty incredible athlete. So check out Culture's episode 181 if you want to, listen to that. And then let's see. Actually, I think that's what's going on. There weren't any, registrations that were on my radar that were about to open this week. So we will get into reflecting on some of the races that did run this past weekend. And we'll have a couple regional and one national. And we are stoked to have on HollyAnn Swann. HollyAnn, thank you for being on here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Ian.
Absolutely. And so for those who don't know HollyAnn, she's a 26-year-old studess out of Huntington, West Virginia. She's an infectious disease lab manager, which must be a pretty crazy time to be an infectious disease lab manager. If that's is that still an accurate title? Am I pulling? Is that still what you're doing?
So the lab I work for, they do infectious disease and toxicology, and I manage a smaller toxicology lab.
Okay. So
I'd love
pretty
to
crazy
do
time.
infectious disease one day.
All right. Well, on the radar for a lot of people these past couple of years, so I suppose that's a very timely occupation. Volunteer coach, is that still happening? Are you there with Marshall University?
Still volunteering.
Still volunteering, cool. And that was at your graduate degree for alma mater?
Marshall ran my 5th year for indoor and outdoor track and field, and undergrad I ran at Auburn University in Montgomery.
Cool. And has affiliations including Rabbit Apparel, as well as being a member of the Trails Collective Elite Team. And any other sponsors that are supporters or support networks that you want to give a shout out to in the intro?
Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate Noon. I'm a Noon Elite member. I'm a part of Trails Collective Elite Team. I really appreciate you, Ian, and everything you guys do for me. And I really appreciate Speedland. They've like changed my whole running career since being able to find their shoes.
Sweet. And HollyAnn has had an incredible performance for Rim to River with the win in 2021. And some other, I mean, still relatively new into the trail ultra space. But this past weekend threw down on her first, I think it was her first 100K effort, correct?
My first 100K effort.
With the high profile Gorge Waterfalls 100K in Cascade Locks, Oregon, just outside of Portland in the Hood River, or Columbia River Gorge, rather, around Hood River, where she finished 4th female in 9:55. So HollyAnn, man, tell us, this was, I guess this had multiple pulls for you in terms of, I think it wasn't initially the plan, but what threw Gorge Waterfalls on your radar?
Yeah, I think I've stuck to a lot of East Coast races, and this past year I've kind of started to see my potential in the trail world. And so I was kind of looking for, like you said, a high profile race in which I could put myself out there and really see what I could do against a competitive field, and just get trail experience in different areas of the country. So Gorge Waterfalls was kind of perfect for checking all the boxes of what I was looking for.
Had you been out or spent any time in the past either hiking or running some of the trails around there?
Not at all. I've only been to the West Coast a handful of times, and mostly just for vacation or conferences for grad school.
Mm-hmm. So a truly spectacular part of the world. Before I moved back to Ithaca 15 years ago or so, I used to live in Central Oregon and occasionally would get up and run some of those trails. My wife now, at the time, lived in Portland, and we'd kind of meet in the middle and do some running there. And early on, when Gorge Waterfalls first came on deck, it was one of the highest profile, probably ultras in the country for a little bit. And then with, I think, fires and floods, I can't remember the history. It was off the books for a while. Changed hands from James Varner and Rain Shadow to Daybreak, but came back. And it was, Daybreak, it looks like they ran a really professional kind of ship, and it was pretty well dialed or well oiled.
It was phenomenal. I can't speak highly enough about the race and what they did and how organized it was. It was an amazing experience.
Cool. And then Speedland was in that mix to a certain extent, and then also with Dylan and Free Trail gave it some more profile as well.
For sure, they Speedland and Free Trail helped sponsor the race, and Debo did a lot for making sure that there was race coverage, and they did an awesome job at covering the race.
Cool. And I was pretty excited early on. I was checking in with one of my longtime friends, Yassine Daboon, who was out there at Aid Station and in his finest with a little fondue fountain. I don't know whether you got to stop. I think you guys were all pretty charging when you came through. But his early texts were that you and Ellie were, I think, 1-2, at least out of the gates for those opening miles. I mean, how did that feel in terms of just, I don't know, charging and going after it?
It was really exciting. I kind of tucked in and got into a comfortable pace for me. And I started to kind of create a strategy in those first few miles. I knew studying the course, like before going out there, that there was going to be a 1,500-foot climb over 2 miles around the 16-mile point. And I have I had yet to experience anything like that in my training. Yeah, so we have climbing out on the East Coast, but that was a little intimidating, and I wasn't sure what that was going to be like since I hadn't experienced any climbs to that extent. So my strategy kind of there in the beginning was to maybe put a small enough gap on the women's field that because I knew without a doubt that a lot of these women were from the West Coast, and not only I mean, even Ellie, she's from the East Coast, but she has ran on West Coast trails and has tackled some climbs like this. And me being new to the trail world, I haven't experienced anything like that. So I knew that these women would really charge on that climb. And so, yeah, my biggest goal was to get a few minutes ahead so that whenever it got to that climb, that they wouldn't be completely leaving me.
Mm-hmm. And when you got there, did you surprise yourself and felt okay? Or did you not necessarily surprise yourself and be like, wow, this is like a big climb and this is just kind of hosing me like halfway through?
Yeah, it was a lot better than I expected. But I can definitely tell that, you know, that was my weak area in the race. It was a series of switchbacks, and as I was nearing the top of the waterfall area, right before we start to ascend back down, I could peek over my shoulder to the left and look down the switchbacks, and I could already see Hannah and Ellie and Tara just below. So it was as anticipated.
And in that moment, that must have been, I don't know, I guess what we're in that moment, looking down over the switchbacks, knowing you have some fast women. I mean, there's a pretty deep and solid field that were coming at you, some from that neck of the woods, some trained on the course, many of them used to some of that bigger terrain, some have also used to up in the miles. I mean, that must have been playing out in your head instantaneously. And I don't know, what were you thinking in that moment?
It wasn't necessarily a bad thing because, like I said, I was nearing the top of the climb, so it was kind of playing out exactly like I thought, that they were starting to build on me right before I'd start the descent.
Yeah. And then as the race got on, any highlights? I mean, any places where you just kind of like dipped and second guessed things and then pulled back out of that, or high points? Did you feel pretty decent most of the day?
Yeah, so Thursday morning before heading to the race, that was the morning that we went to the airport. Woke up to get all my luggage together, and my throat was completely burning, like my sinuses were draining. And like my immediate thought was, this seriously can't be happening. Like I can't be getting sick now, 2 days before my big race. But I kind of like used cognitive dissonance, like pretended like it wasn't happening, and drank me a big glass of Noon Immunity, and just pretended like it wasn't there. And so then whenever we got into Portland, grabbed some Mucinex and was trying to knock it out the best that I could. So that race morning I could tell my throat was feeling a little bit better and I wasn't draining as bad. So I was kind of excited that maybe that meant that I wouldn't have any issues during the race. But as soon as we started, it started to sprinkle, and then the rain got a little harder and colder. I could just feel my sinuses relentlessly draining. And I think around mile 7 or 8, I started trying to get my gels in, and I couldn't swallow very well, so I couldn't get them down. And it was kind of the series of me like trying to take the gels in, but they wouldn't go down, and I got super nauseous. So I think I had a solid 10-mile stretch in this race where I just kind of hit a big energy deficit. And that was honestly the biggest ride I've ever been in an ultra race. And I think by the time that I got back to Yeon, which was 29, like my legs were almost starting to lock up, and I was trying to coax and convince myself that somehow I could make up on fueling, even though I wasn't even sure that was possible. So about that time, like my sinuses stopped draining as bad as they were, and I was able to get a couple of gels down, and I just tried to eat a sandwich and gels and just kept moving and grinding, and it seemed to work. I seemed to start like climbing out of my rut, and I guess about the time that I saw your friend Yassine, I guess it was just an exciting period because I kind of felt like I was back in the race. Like I fully didn't expect to come out of that rut after being in it for 10 miles, and I was kind of shocked to find that the women were only 8 minutes ahead because I knew how bad I felt. And so like that kind of gave me motivation, and I started working back. And I had another update while I was in the trails that they were only 7 minutes ahead. And then when we got to the turnaround with 13 to go, they were only 5 minutes ahead. And by the time I got back to Cascade Locks, which was only 3 miles from the finish line, I had worked my way up to 3 minutes, which was really exciting. And it was not impossible to lose 3 minutes and 3 miles, but kind of improbable at that point. But I don't know. I was pretty proud of myself for being able to come out of the rut.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's the beauty of ultra and the beauty of 100K distance, where you've got time to really bonk even for a long period like 10 miles, but still come back out of it. And then also know that, I mean, it's rare that somebody isn't experiencing something along those lines. And you were all charging really well there at the end and all holding your own. And so it was pretty awesome. And so any kind of takeaways or something that you'd, any moments on the beauty of the course or the recommendation for others to go out and hit it?
I think the biggest notes for me, like I said, this was my first 100K, so I wasn't sure what to expect. 50Ks still feel to me kind of like an all-out race, like it's closer to my marathon distance, and the 100-mile distance to me feels like a long, slow grind. So I wasn't sure like what this was going to feel like in between, but I was excited that I handled it so well. But the biggest learning point was that I need to work on my aid station. I think I spent a solid 10 minutes chilling at aid stations, and yeah, I need to learn to move through those with gusto.
Yeah, and you for sure will. Yeah, and that's good, right? You've got a crew that's totally dialed in that you don't need to spend time there, or you just know to grab and go and kind of keep going. But whatever, that comes in time. And I think it was a pretty impressive first 100K effort, coming off of an impressive first 100-mile or second 100-mile effort. I think that was last year. So awesome job. You really ran incredible. And I am still stoked to see where you keep going from here. Ironman, as well as then back to the trails.
Well, thank you, Ian.
Yeah, totally. Well, it'll be good to dig in for kind of a full episode on Gorge, and it would be fun to do that. But I'll boot you for now. But I'm stoked that you were able to take a little bit of time tonight, and that you're out of your time tonight, and that you're feeling pretty good on the recovery front. So maybe I can still give you a call, and we'll debrief further.
I'd love that. Thank you for chatting with me, Ian.
Totally. All right. I'll talk to you later. All right. Next up, got Chris Rice. Chris is a 48-year-old endurance athlete from Suffern, New York. He's proven the longer the better with multiple Badwater 135 finishes, the Moab 240 under his belt as well. as well as over 70 other ultras. This past weekend, he completed the Paumanok Pursuit 70K in Long Island, an event that wasn't on my radar prior, and it was an adventure in and of itself, just trying to find results and details on that race. So, Chris, thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for taking some of your time out.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. So, give us the rundown. What's Paumanok all about? And again, because I wasn't really aware of it before, but it looks like it's been around at least a couple of years. And what's it all about?
Yeah, it's so I signed up for it. I found it late last week. I signed up Friday night.
Nothing like living in the moment.
Yeah. I sort of saw that I had an opening on Sunday to do something. So I started kind of fishing around and found that race. And I have some family on Long Island, so I was able to get someone to pick me up from the finish line, my cousins, and bring me back to the start line to get my car. So it looked like it was going to work out. And the trail, I mean, the race is awesome. It's really, it's an interesting format. It's a relay or solo. There's 5 legs, and it's a more difficult race than I had anticipated. You just think, I live north of Manhattan, so it's pretty hilly up here. I live like right on Bear Mountain. And so I think Long Island, I think flat, but the course was rolling. And the third of the 5 legs was a challenging stretch, more so than I had planned for. It kind of got to me a bit, got my stomach churning because I was kind of running up every hill like, well, this will probably be the last one. This is Long Island, but there was always another one there. But the trail was gorgeous, empty, not, another thing being where I am here, it's like rocks and roots everywhere. So you're tripping and falling. This was nice, clean trail, sort of pine forest. So padded, like almost a padded trail with all the needles on it. So like a really scenic, fun run. Not super crowded, decent crowd, but it's spread out. And because you have the relay teams mixed in with the solos, that the crowd thins out pretty quick. And you're just running kind of with the solos. But the weather kind of turned on Sunday. Went from a decent start to cold and rainy. I was, not prepared. I didn't really give it all that much thought in advance. So I ended up a little chilly in the later sections. But it was a more challenging race than in summary, more challenging race than I had anticipated. Long Island is hillier than I thought, especially in the middle. The race cuts the island like diagonally, north to south. So in the middle section of the island, I guess where you'd imagine, it's sort of some elevation and a lot of ups and downs. But again, like the group that puts it on, super friendly group, very accommodating, good aid stations. It's tough. I've been in a few of these races where they try to do relay and solo, especially like something over, that distance. Usually the race is kind of balanced for one group or the other. This was a nice balance. And the teams were cheering on the solos. So it's just a great environment. Strong recommendation. I'll go back and do it again. It's certainly convenient for me. And it's a sort of a nice change from, the roots and rocks I'm kind of used to here.
Yeah, and that's the couple of both. So are you West Point related, or are you military related in terms of being on Bear Mountain? No, okay.
No. My father was, but I just sound like I am.
Yeah. So for those who aren't necessarily familiar with your neck of the woods, for those who don't know, around Bear Mountain, basically at Chris's then doorstep, so to speak, you've got like hundreds of miles of trails, and just in and around Bear Mountain alone. Outstanding elevation gain and loss, a lot of technicality. The amount of trails around New York City, particularly north, is literally mind-boggling as you go up through the Hudson Valley. So definitely an amazing playground. And the other part of what you referenced going out into Long Island, I think people forget or just don't really know I guess one, how big Long Island is, and then two, just how rural it can get and how rolling it is. So for you, in terms of the difficulty, you think it was just a time of year and just because you were expecting it to be pretty deadpan flat, or it was, I guess, runnable enough that you're not used to, that once you get on kind of like a fast runnable course, like that's hard. Like you don't get the excuses to top and take breaks or power hike ascents or whatever. You're just like, got to run 50K.
It was more like, some days you're the windshield and some days you're the bug. And I was just the bug on Sunday. I think, it wasn't anything specific other than just a little bit rougher than I thought. I just didn't, in hindsight, I just didn't run as well as I would have liked, but it's a good experience regardless.
Cool. And, I don't remember, is that the same, is that what Shore to Shore uses as well? Are they using the Greenbelt Trail?
They use the Greenbelt Trail, I believe. That's closer to the city. This trail kind of heads out. It's pretty far out there. It's in the Pine Barrens, so it's like on the way out to like Montauk.
Oh, okay.
So it's
got it.
It's pretty far out there. But the Greenbelt Trail race that you mentioned, and then the Shore to Shore, I think are closer to Manhattan.
Okay. And do you think they're similar terrain? Are they just kind of rolling and some nice trails as well? Or?
Yeah. I've done. They're rolling. I don't remember as acute section as that third leg of this third of the five in this past one. But there are a couple steep places, you're not gaining 1,000 feet, but they're just sort of steep, and you get a few of them in a row. And you're on sand as well. I mean, not like soft sand or anything, but the footing isn't quite as crisp as like hard pack.
Right on. So what, you got a couple big things on deck? I mean, based on what you tend to go after, some long stuff, what do you got planned this year?
I'm going to do Badwater again, and I'm going to do Moab again. And I got some adventure racing sprinkled in.
That's great. Well, it'll be fun. Maybe I can keep an eye on you and maybe touch base again after Badwater or Moab, and maybe have a little, Badwater or Moab roundtable or something.
No problem. That'd be great.
Cool. Well, Chris, thanks for joining us for a few minutes tonight, and nice work this weekend. And thanks for giving us the rundown of Paumanok.
All right, buddy. Have a good one.
All right, dude.
Thanks.
All right, see you.
See ya.
All right. Riley.
Hey.
So, weaving in Riley Brady. Riley is a 30-year-old stellar bike mechanic, from what I imagine.
I'm 26, but thanks.
26. Gosh, maybe I just glanced at an ultra sign up and there was a different Riley Brady and I put 30, or maybe I just felt like you are 30 in spirit and we're just going to call you 30. 26-year-old stellar, probably bike mechanic, an endurance adventurer based in still New Hope. I hear you got some new apartments, maybe?
Yep, in Philly, in Germantown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also part of the Trails Collective elite team. So stoked to have Riley. Riley's won about half. I think maybe a little under, maybe like 48% win rate on the ultras completed, including Cayuga Trails and Virgil Crest. I think both, that was time's a blur, but both last year, right? Taking the wins on both of those.
Yep.
And this past weekend, another notch in the proverbial belt with an overall win at the Naked Prussian Marathon in Leesport, PA in 3 hours and 27 minutes. So clearly your body is coming back and feeling pretty good again. And that's not a slow trail marathon. And is that still run a little bit long? Is it still like 27 miles or something? What's the new course variation?
No, I think it's a little short. I think my watch said like 25.6 or something like that. So it's just shy of a true marathon.
Got it. So you finished and then you turned around and went back out just until your watch said 26.2?
Nope. With trail marathons, I figure like it's, you might be under sometimes, over other times, but it all comes out in the wash at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's fair. All right. So, and you're no stranger to the Uber Endurance Sports lineup. For those who aren't familiar, give a brief little gist of what Uber Endurance is about in terms of community or feel, or some of the events they put on.
Yeah, they put on great events. Like, I think I've only just done their events over the last couple of years, but they're really affordable races. They have, they kind of bill themselves as no frills. So pretty minimal swag, which I actually really appreciate. because I find that often I'm carting home too much stuff after races and I just want to go run. But the culture has been awesome. Like there's always a good finish line vibe. There's people hanging out. Like this past time, there was a group of us who all kind of discovered that we lived in the same general area, and we were having a good time. So they put on really good events, and I kind of like the German music. It's a nice added touch.
You've yet to show up and race in lederhosen, though, at least that I've seen.
Yes, that is true. I don't race in costume. I love Halloween, but I don't run in costume.
That's fair. That's fair. Unless we make a team mandatory thing where we must all run in Trails Collective lederhosen.
Oof, that sounds tough. Lots of chafing.
That does sound tough. Chafing. We'll get a sponsorship from Squirrel's Nut Butter.
Yeah, that's true.
And for those who aren't familiar with the courses, particularly with, so they use it for a couple with Naked Bavarian and Prussian, maybe another one, but give the gist of the course.
Yeah, it's a very runnable course. There's a couple punchy little climbs, but for the most part, really smooth, flowy trails, pretty fast and fun. Like at least conditions were great this past weekend. There's pretty minimal mud. So it was really good conditions for just like opening up and going.
And how'd you feel? You weren't leading outright the whole time, right? I mean,
Correct. So I led off the gun, and then there's a guy who passed me like, I don't know, maybe a mile in, maybe not even. And then I didn't see him for the rest of the race. And then when I crossed the finish line, they told me I had won overall. And I said, well, what happened to that other guy? And they're like, we don't know, but you won.
Nice.
And I guess he had taken a wrong turn. And I chatted with him later, and it was his first trail marathon. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered your original question, but
yeah, it did. So maybe next time his takeaway was to maybe sit on Riley's shoulder and just stay there for a while.
I don't know. We'll see. He was young. He was really young. He was like 19 or something.
Not like you're 30. So you've got like at least 11 years on him at this point.
Right.
So, and you felt pretty good. So you
yeah.
had it was your, I can't remember, it was your calf or what was tweaked a couple months ago?
My right knee, like, I don't know what I did to it, but I went to a rollerblading birthday party and rollerbladed my heart out.
I don't know what beyond that, but all right, keep going. Yeah.
And messed up something in that like right chain where I was feeling pain in my knee. And that was before Black Canyon, which was a huge disappointment, but I took some time off after that and built back slowly, and I'm feeling really good now. And the race this past weekend, the goal was to just kind of like kick off the season feeling strong, go out in adventure mode. And that's what I did. And I felt great all day. Like I didn't have any low points. I felt strong the whole time. I felt good.
Cool. And then what's your focus for this year, or what is, as much as you know, what are you thinking about?
So my big focus is going to be Javelina in the fall. But I'm also going to do Vermont 100K kind of late in the summer. But up until then, I'm still trying to figure out like shorter distance races to just try and work on the speed side of things, because I really like the longer distance stuff. Like I feel like my strength is actually at the 100-mile distance, but I'd like to kind of raise that speed ceiling in the earlier part of the season. And as far as Red Newt races, I am not sure how many I'm going to do, but I'm definitely planning on volunteering. So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
Well, I can always use the volunteer hands, and I'll be stoked to see what you do as well. And I know you like the Vermont course, right? There you felt pretty.
I've only done the 100-mile out there. I like the community. It's definitely more of like a road. It's like a dirt road rather than trail. I mean, it's lovely. I enjoy it. I am excited to try sort of a shorter distance on that course, and just be out there with that group of people and in the field with no cell service. It's a cool place to be.
Yeah, cool. Well, I see some of the guests for this next segment, including Sabrina there on the back end. Really, it'd be fun to just bring Sabrina in and let you and her connect for a while, because I know she's done some cool events as well, and also done some well over the longer races. But maybe you're already connected, but if not, maybe we can find another excuse to connect some people. Well, cool. It was great to see you in your flow, racing well, and I'll talk to you more here pretty soon. So nice work.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Riley. All right, talk to you more soon.
Bye.
See ya. All right, so in this next segment, we are going to move into the kind of feature or going long segment, and we are going to bring in a couple individuals. We'll start off with Sabrina and Michael. Mario, who is also doing some coaching. Before I moved back to Ithaca, I lived in Bend for maybe 6 years, and so I think Mario arrived after I left, but I still have a good visual of where he's coaching, which is I think in Madras, just north of. So he may join us when he's able to finish up practice. I think he's literally finishing practice right now, so hopefully he'll join. But Sabrina and Michael, thank you so much for taking some of your time tonight and being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Totally. And now, Michael, you being on a couple times, I feel like I'm starting to feel at home looking at your shop in the background there. So it's comforting.
All right.
Yes, it makes me feel secure on this end of that.
Good. That's what I was going for. Security.
That's good. That's good. So I'll do a couple introductions here. Sabrina Little I just got Riley's age wrong. I threw it off, but I'm pretty sure you're 39, Sabrina. Am I getting that right?
I'm 35.
Oh no, Mario. Yeah, I still have 39. You're 35.
Yep.
I don't know where my head was on this. Trying to do. In any case, Sabrina is not 39. She will be 39 in 4 years, but we'll just say she's 30. We'll just say she's 35 now. Native of Vernon, New Jersey. All right, you let me know if I'm botching one of these other things. Is an instructor or professor of philosophy and residing in Moorhead, Kentucky at the moment. All right, still good. Sabrina is a prior representative of Team USA for Trail Worlds, and I believe a couple-time U.S. trail champion. I think, was it 50?
Yeah,
five time.
300 miles, 124-hour, and then the 50 at Cayuga.
Yeah, that's not a bad amount of national championships to hold there. Not so much insignificance. And a prior hat was working with the Trinity Forum, which I thought was applicable for tonight. I just saw that in your profile, which promotes personal and cultural renewal by helping established and emerging leaders connect with great ideas in the context of faith. She's also a frequent content contributor to publications including I Run Far, though it's my intent to proposition her to move over to the Trails Collective for such writings. But many are experienced with, I think, Sabrina's writings. I've had several people comment over the years on just really, really enjoying, I guess, your thoughts and how you put pen or keys to paper or computer. So thanks for all that. Michael Dubova, ages. Michael, are you 30? How old are you, dude?
37.
I was going to get that one right. Michael Dubova is a 37-year-old custom mandolin creator from Charlottesville, Virginia. Straight mandolins? Do you make other instruments too? I may have asked that before.
Yeah, guitars, violins, banjos, electric guitar. Yeah, just whatever people order.
Cool. From Charlottesville, Virginia. He is known for being able to hurt with the best of them, finishing, also known for, as I commented in the past, finishing second in ultras. Except for when racing Mendoza, and who's not on here because that would have been a fun little shot at Mendoza. He is a former Crozet Ultra team member and long live Crozet running, and current member of the Trails Collective elite team. And he is fresh off of being frozen out of a wee race, an event called Barkley just a few weeks ago. So hopefully you're emotionally recovered from that one and in all that processing. So it is wonderful to have both of you on with us. So what I was thinking of doing was basically introducing a concept, maybe just throwing out a quote, and then somewhat of a concept or a question around it. And maybe we'll dig in, and if Mario is able to sign on, that works too. But then just open it up. Like if you guys have any thoughts or questions for either of you or each other or whatever, feel free to put it out there. If you want to take any tangents, it's pretty open, but I'll try to give us a few things to talk about. And so to the thought of spirituality and ultra, probably starting for me personally, I don't know, somewhere even like junior high and still persists to this day. I don't really totally fully understand why, but I guess it makes it an innate thing where ahead of a lot of races, I still find myself taking a knee. And usually I'll move away from a starting line, or maybe it's right there in the mix and I'll just drop down. And I don't know whether it's just a formal piece of prayer or whether it's a meditation. But I still, to this day, my mind goes there. And I don't know whether it's kind of like a precursor to doing something uncomfortable, looking for security. But that's what I still do. And so I think that concept, led me to think about just the spirituality and ultra and how it becomes a part of many's lives. Here, in terms of the experiences on deck, I'll try not to make it about religions per se, though that may weave through. We'll have, I did reach out that I tried to broaden our scope a little bit in terms of religious backgrounds, but wasn't able, but that won't necessarily be the focus, even though sometimes they're connected. So in as much as that was a little bit of a word salad, Sabrina, Michael, how's that sound? Sure. Thanks. You could have been like, no, dude, sorry, out of here. So thanks for sticking with me so far.
Yeah.
All right. And there's no specific order here to what we'll get into, but also a further preface. So there's countless Bible verses on perseverance and endurance, any number that you could, I'm sure if with Mario, if he gets on being a pastor himself, he could probably at his fingertips quote any number of Bible passages. The state of being and trials of the 10-day, I probably mispronounced that, Buddhist or the marathon monks, maybe a penultimate test or state of endurance, in which probably many of us have read about over the years. 3 of the 5 pillars of Islam require that Muslims be of sound health and fitness with 5 daily prayers, and in themselves being forms of exercise. One of the 5 nimiyas, if I pronounced that right, which I probably didn't, anchoring a Hindu path is tapas, the performance of physical and mental discipline. And for Navajos, running is a teacher, a form of prayer, and a celebration of life, a literal anchor in both culture and spirituality. So what I hope we can scratch the surface of here tonight is the connection between endurance and spirituality, which is a fabric united many, if not most, of the religions out there. So let's get into maybe the first quote, and then I will shut up and hopefully glean more of your insight. So first quote, endurance is one of the most difficult disciplines, but it is to the one who endures that the final victory comes. And a quote from Gautama, and sorry, my pronunciation's Buddha. And so give us, on that thought, give us a depiction of your inner monologue, or where do you go when the wheels fall off, which reflects your underlying spiritual path in Ultra. And let me know as we go to, if you want me to re-say a quote or the concept, and even if we go into a different tangent, that's okay. But where you guys go, and Michael, I've brought this up a couple times, and I've continued to be fascinated, and so I wanted to dig into it a bit more here tonight as well. I think it's appropriate. So where do you guys go in your inner monologue when the wheels really fall off? Because you've both embraced these really long events where no doubt you get into these really tough patches and where the wheels are off, and you probably go to, I don't know, either dark or bright places. But where do you go reflect your spirituality?
Who would you like to talk first?
Go ahead. You're good.
Okay. Well, this reminds me when you gave that quote about, where do you go when the wheels come off? It's interesting. There's I write in the virtue and vice tradition, and some of this is the ancients, but a lot of it is informed by the monastic tradition, and then also the medievals, many whom have theological commitments. And there's this vice called akedia, and it is defined as resistance to the demands of love. And it means that you're not able to stay in place where you are. And so when I think about like the lack of perseverance or being unable to remain under the burden, to do the kind of necessary work that continues you forward, there is, in the tradition, they describe two tendencies, and one is kind of to just despair, and then one is just like this kind of frenetic busyness that takes over you. And so people deal with this inability to persevere, or inability to remain in the right kinds of work in these two polar ways. I think for most people who are ultra runners, probably the tendency is not just to despair or resist. Probably for most of us, it's kind of to turn to this sort of internal busyness where you just like your mind wanders, or you would rather flit off or do anything else. And so having to, like when I'm in these moments where I'm having a hard time persevering, I just have to like draw myself back and say, like, I'm not asking you to do anything differently. I'm just asking you to stay where you are now and just commit to this necessary work and be here, because it's a manifestation of love, right? Being able to stay instead of flit off or just give up entirely.
And so what were manifestation of love with any anchoring or connection, or love for a certain thing or activity, or it's not even anchored to any of that? It's just this unanchored feeling of love.
Yeah. So in the tradition, when the monastics are talking about it, it's love for God. So staying committed to love for God. But the word has been appropriated in secular context, kind of just in the persevering sense of just like remaining with good work. Because I think even in the secular context, we can all point to situations in which you have work that you need to do. Maybe it's like working on a paper or something, and you just either distract yourself with all the other things that you could do instead, or you just laze off and be a sloth. So these are like the two kinds of tendencies of dealing with a failure to stay with the right kind of work, or failing to remain in your love. So yeah, that like love to God is cast as a kind of remaining or persevering, staying with something.
And then that, Michael, as you've talked about your own, without even putting that out there, you go ahead. And I know we're a few minutes probably away from me saying it, but based on what Sabrina had just mentioned or referenced, what was your reaction in terms of, and again, you've told me before, but where you go when the wheels fall off and in those dark places, and reflecting on what Sabrina just said as well?
Yeah, a few points. One thing, what Sabrina's talking about kind of reminds me of that book, The War of Art, where you have to face the resistance to move to a higher, kind of that next rung on the ladder of development or existence. So you can either face the resistance, knowing that it's actually moving you along to become better at what you're doing or improve your mindset. And if you choose not to face that resistance, then the result will be kind of staying stagnant where you are, where it's emotionally, physically, if you're in a race. So you kind of have to go towards that resistance. Otherwise, you're not going to progress as a person, or I guess in a race, if we're kind of tying it into race situations. Mm-hmm. And then I guess for me personally, I just take refuge in the present moment, I guess, or try to, because that's all that there is. And it's like that John Kabat-Zinn like saying in book, like, wherever you go, there you are. Like, whether you want to be there or not, like, that's where you are, wherever you are. And so why not just be grounded in that? And then that ties into being hopefully you're reminded about gratitude for that, so.
And I guess I prefaced this evening with not necessarily tying in religion, but I guess that doesn't have to be, I guess that's implying that could go to a negative place, but I don't think that maybe maybe that was wrong of me. Like hearing you both talk, I think a beautiful thing is that you can have variations on common themes across religions. And so when I'm hearing both of you talk, you're talking about similar themes, but I also get some of your frameworks in your understandings. So Sabrina, so let's, all right, let me back up because I guess this would be appropriate. So Sabrina, if you were to quantify your spirituality into a religious practice, I guess what's your religion?
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
And anything within that makes a difference in terms of denomination or whatever?
I mean, I mean, I'm a Presbyterian, but I have a devotional practice where I read the Bible every day, and I guess I've been a Christian my whole life. But I'm a Presbyterian, but I don't say I'm more inclined to say I'm a Christian than Presbyterian.
And then Michael, for you, I know the answer, but for your religion, so to speak, your framework.
Yeah, I mean, I lean towards like, Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, although it's more, in a sense, Buddhist psychology, and that kind of is dovetailed into just nature and kind of being in tune with nature and being aware of like nature's pulse.
And so I think there's a beauty there. And so there's also comments coming in the thread, and I will weave these comments in. We'll maybe do it before we switch topics, because I think it's great. And you guys, I want you to have the ability to respond to some of those. But I think a beautiful thing is to then see you coming at it from different frameworks for at least both of you. And Mario is a Christian as well. And he's a pastor at I think a Friends Association or Quaker, which maybe will have an interesting vein as well. But I think it's beautiful to see you both, I guess, referencing, similar things. And I think that is pertinent to anybody who's not necessarily an elite runner like both of you are, an elite endurance athlete. I guess a lot of individuals, or all of us in endurance sport, will go to those places or find ourselves in tough spots, and whether that's an ultra or the larger context. But both referencing Michael, maybe you phrased it as gratitude. Sabrina, you were phrasing it as love. But it seems like you have this, and I'm forgetting the words in the moment. I brought it up with Horton a couple weeks ago, but this kind of Protestant kind of ideology of kind of persevering or like hard work to like a certain end. And then Michael, for you, the hard work, the perseverance to basically progress to this like different level of awareness or understanding. So it would seem like there's that common thread there that's happening for both of you, but maybe manifested in a different framework. But being present in the moment, embracing it for what it is, accepting it, not running from it. And then in essence, in life, then progressing, and in a race, kind of moving through it, moving into that next wave or that next phase. So that's cool. Okay, so a couple comments, and I'll move to the next one. So Ellie, I'll put it up here on the screen so you guys can see it as well. And Ellie wanted to be a part as well, so I'm glad she's tuning in. How do you decide when the suffering should end? When is it enough? And either of you can jump in on that, and however you perceive that question.
I mean, I think it takes a lot of prudence to know. Like, I think early on in your days as a runner, it's hard to know what productive suffering is, like what's good pain and what's bad pain. There's a certain amount of, just in improvement in general, it takes a little bit of like, I don't even know if suffering is the right word, but just like discomfort, which is edifying. But I think as you grow in the sport, you realize or you come to recognize better where the lines are. I am not a person who seeks out gratuitous suffering, but suffering toward good ends is important. So I think when you think about what is virtuous perseverance versus just being hard-headed or intransigent or something like that, it takes into consideration the kind of end that you're committed to. And so if you're doing something for, I don't know, like to punish yourself, or in a way that, or you're acting in a manner that's going to damage you long term, then I don't think that is a productive kind of suffering. But again, I think it takes time in the sport and a growing knowledge of your body to know where the lines are between this is just being uncomfortable and this is actually doing damage.
Mm-hmm. And then, Michael, you've been in those spots too, and to a certain extent, even just most recently in Barkley, making the decision based on the Raynaud's and the pain and the suffering, and where that becomes kind of unsafe. So the thought of how, and you made the decision there, decide when the suffering should end and when is it enough.
Yeah, I mean, Barkley, I think, was definitely a lot of safety. So I don't know if I'd call it suffering. I mean, borderline hypothermia and the Raynaud syndrome, that's, I don't know. I just don't like the word suffering, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like suffering, I feel like if you keep the word suffering in your mind, then it can spring up as something you can fixate on to the point that you're creating your own suffering. And I feel like that's the worst type of suffering, is creating your own suffering and not being like present. Like, so I don't know if I haven't really thought about suffering extensively, because I don't know if I necessarily believe in it in a way as far as like running or endurance things. I think it's just you're existing with that micro feeling at that moment in time. And it's like, if your mind's fixated on that feeling, then you're gonna feel like you're suffering. But if you randomly think about something else, and suddenly there's a lag in that suffering, but then it can come back. So is suffering like a continuous thing, or are there these like pauses to the suffering? And I think that kind of dissolves any sense of like suffering as being like, 60 minutes long or 2 miles long of suffering. I think it's just what your mind is fixating on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's kind of like, well, just if it comes up, use it coming up as a prompt to not focus on it, if that makes sense.
I think so. And so there are also kind of commonalities. I mean, Sabrina, you were, I guess, also, and thanks for kind of processing the question there in the moment, but also, I guess that concept of suffering, I think, also gave you pause. And when it was maybe like hard work or getting through something, but not necessarily suffering in that context, I guess.
Yeah. I disagree with Michael in thinking that it's something that it's entirely just like a phenomenal quality that you can step in and out of. Like, I do think that there are, like, I don't know, there is something to suffering. I guess what I am pushing back against is the rhetoric of like no pain, no gain, as though it's like always an unqualified good to suffer, that, oh, we go out in the woods and we make ourselves hurt or something. That doesn't seem productive to me. But I do think in daily life, like, there are things like unchosen suffering, things that happen, like you get sick or you lose a job or your loved one is ill or something. And I think that having that kind of practice in suffering in running can prepare you for how not to freak out and to just like acknowledge that it's there and be present with it, and work through it, like not seeing it as the end or something. Yeah.
And that may, and Sarah just dropped another comment in there, was that doesn't that discomfort, extended state of pain also create a spiritual opening? So, I mean, I guess you both just hinted at that as well. But I'll put it up. You could probably see it in the notes too. But doesn't that discomfort, extended state of pain also create a spiritual opening or spiritual openings?
Not 100% of the time. I mean, yeah. I think the things need to align pretty well to be fully open to the space it's creating. I don't know. Suffering's an interesting thing. I'm still kind of like pondering that question, to be honest. Yeah, Sabrina, if you have thoughts, you can go ahead. I'm kind of like thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I just like don't want to treat all forms of suffering the same, because I mean, suffering is a concept that, like, as a Christian has priority insofar as like Christ is called a suffering servant, and you're supposed to like take up the cross and follow him. That's like, oh, becoming a companion in suffering, or to some extent. But I don't think it means like going into the woods and running so hard that you like become ill or something. So I don't know how to.
Yeah, there's so many nuances to suffering. Like,
yeah,
there's like first world problem suffering. Then there's like the recent like stuff going on in Ukraine suffering. Like, there's just, you know, it's, I don't know. It's tough, but I think it's, so at the very least, I think everybody should contemplate suffering and like really sit with it and think about, what does suffering mean to me and why does it mean that? I think that's a valuable use of time.
So how about within a framework that hits a little bit closer to home, even though I don't know if I was about to say extreme, but I don't know if it's fair for me to say extreme, but in an example of the marathon monks, and I'm assuming both of you are familiar with that community, those individuals, or that endeavor. I don't know. I mean, like, would you define what they're doing as an intentional state of suffering and basically looking or seeking spiritual transcendence through that state of suffering? Or would suffering still not be appropriate in that context, even though from my vantage point, that just seems like a whole lot of intentional suffering?
Yeah. I don't feel in a position to judge anyone else's suffering, because I think it's like on your individual conscience. There's also like a tradition. I mean, there's this desert tradition in the Christian vein where like they were ascetics and they would, you know, deprive themselves of food. And there were some of them who were stylites. Like they would stand on these like tall pillars in the desert and like undergo all of these things. And it was kind of an overcorrection for the weaknesses in their flesh, and they were trying to come to this like place of peace and like unity and so forth. And so they were able to use these kinds of like really, I don't know, to me it seems like arbitrary actions of restraint that kind of edified their spirit and directed them in the right ways. So I don't know, like maybe any kind of suffering like you enter into can serve that role, but I think it has to be like on your individual conscience, and I definitely wouldn't speak over how anyone else is doing it.
So, and I just got a visual of maybe a traditional Native American maybe ceremony as well, based on, and I guess suffering isn't the right word, but I was thinking of it as you were talking about some of those historically in the desert, Sabrina, or as I was driving the concept with the monks, and also thinking of the interplay between the various cultures. And it almost seems like rather than suffering, it's almost through either deprivation or physical, or the state of physical harm in more of like a purification ritual. So how about that in terms of somewhat of a tangent on that topic, but do you see a certain purification in a spiritual sense through some of your endurance events?
Or who are you speaking to?
Both of you. Yeah, and only I want to say this, I'll put it out there, and if you can both just try to chew on it for a second, but in some of these, if I say something, you're like, I don't really have an answer for that, that's fine. We don't have to dwell there. But if it stirs, and either one of you can jump on it or dwell and then jump in on it. But I guess to a certain extent, the amount of miles, the potential trauma to the body, whether you're really fit or not, the effort in perseverance and endurance, is that some level of a modern day or more accepted state of purification through suffering?
Well, personally, I think so. I've never thought of it in being in those terms, but I do think of running as a really good opportunity for silence, which I think is an important like spiritual practice, and also just just like moments of stillness, which I think it's ironic, right? Because you're moving forward through space, but then having those moments where you're not captured by any devices and no one else is asking for your time. I think that is really important. It's interesting when you said about how you're inclined to bow down like before races, that kind of thing. It's interesting that both running and religions are pretty liturgical in their constitutions. Like there are things that we do repeatedly as runners, like we stretch in a certain way, we tie our shoes in a certain way, we keep like to our schedules to a T and so forth. And religions are often do the same thing, like you reify certain actions and certain action patterns in order to have these kinds of spiritual touchstones in your life. And for me, I think running has played a role in being part of that well-ordered life, which has these spiritual dimensions, and like having that place of silence or just having the place of being present in nature and seeing beauty and majesty there. Like all of these parts have been integral in just like having little touchstones for me that connect me to my faith.
Mm-hmm. And there was, if you're Kawana, just had another comment come in. I think the kind of suffering the marathon monks experience is, and here I am, I guess I'm keeping us in this, using the term of suffering. I just tied it back in where it seemed like we had moved kind of beyond that. But I think the kind of suffering the marathon monks experience is meant to instill a sense of humility and devotion to something other than oneself. Yeah. All right, so it looked like Mario just tried to log on, but was unable. We just lost, I think, Michael just lost his connection. Hopefully he'll log back on. But I will maybe move on to the next one, Sabrina, here with the next quote and concept here. So not in achievement, but in endurance of the human soul does it show its divine grandeur and its alliance with the infinite. So not in achievement, but in endurance of the human soul does it show its divine grandeur and its alliance with the infinite. Quote from Edwin Hubble Chapin. Do you think that ultra has the effect of stripping away the superficial baggage to reveal an inner spiritual reflection?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked the framing of that quotation because, I mean, the ancients say something similar about how like the greatest expression of our humanity is to commit to something and to see it to fruition. And so I think like committing to finish a race and like actually bringing yourself to do that, I mean, that is like a humanizing special activity. So that's what I thought of.
Yeah, and so Michael, if you got your audio back, I'll just give the quote too, and then if we wanted you on a bit. So it was not in achievement, but in endurance of the human soul does it show its divine grandeur and its alliance with the infinite. I'll say it one more time. Not in achievement, but in endurance of the human soul does it show its divine grandeur and its alliance with the infinite. And then my follow-up was, do you think ultra has the effect of stripping away the superficial baggage to reveal an inner spiritual reflection?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I always feel like, I don't know if it does on purpose, but I always feel like the first hour of a race is always the worst because it's kind of like you're shedding you're kind of leaving all your baggage of your days or weeks behind. And I feel like it takes an hour, just like it takes time to physically warm up. It takes time to like mentally warm up and totally, kind of be more open or receptive to the nuances of the race, which I guess some people might label as like a spiritual experience the deeper they get into the race. So I don't know. So I lost my train of thought because
that's all right. And I broke it a little bit as well. And bringing in Mario. Mario, thanks for making it on here, brother. And it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you guys.
How's it going, Mario?
And so now that he's with us, I will do just a quick intro for Mario. And then Mario, I'll give you the lay of the land here, and we'll get back into it where we are at the moment. So Mario Mendoza, are you 36? Because I'm getting a couple ages wrong here.
Dude, I keep forgetting my age. Yeah, I am 36.
All right. So Mario Mendoza is a 36-year-old trail and ultra stud out of Bend, Oregon, a prior U.S. team member as well and national champion. He is a pastor at the Metolius Friends Community Church. Is that where you're at the moment? Did I get that right?
Yep.
Cool. He's leadership at Central Oregon Youth for Christ. He's a distance coach at Madras High School. Are you coaching a high school team?
Yeah.
Cool.
That's where I was right now.
Yeah, right on. And is quite possibly best known not for owning the treadmill 100K world record of 6:39, but rather for getting trounced by Michael Dubova in the 2021 Hellgate 100K.
Yes.
Yes.
Heck yeah.
So
666.
So it is good to have you on with us as well, Mario. And so what we kind of the frame of the lay of the land is I'm laying out a quote and then with a follow-up, somewhat of a question concept around it, and just seeing whether you all have maybe some reactions or want to weigh in. And it's we can take tangents, you can respond to one another, but just kind of seeing where it goes. And so that second quote was, and sorry for those of you who are listening or listening after, this is probably like the 8th time I'm going to say this quote, but that's all right. Not in achievement, but endurance of the human soul does it show that its divine grandeur and its alliance with the infinite. And then it was the follow-up was, do you think ultra has the effect of stripping away the superficial baggage to reveal an inner spiritual reflection?
Yeah, I am definitely going to go back and listen to what Michael and Sabrina have shared, because I admire them both, and I know they've probably got a lot to say. And so I'm kind of late to the party, but I would say, in my experience, that's probably my favorite thing about ultra running is that I learned so much about myself. I've just really, really been able to see a lot of my weaknesses, but also learn how to be stronger and learn how to dig deeper. And I actually I think of a couple of pivotal points in my career where I finally stuck it out. Things were just going awful, and the race was not playing out the way that I wanted it to, but I stuck with it and made it to the finish, and it really, really allowed me to see myself differently, to see that I was probably the harshest critic on myself and was the one that was afraid of bad results more than anyone else. And I realized people didn't care too much that I didn't do so well, and it was more me. And I actually, for me, remembering when I was a kid and the joy of running up mountains and being on a farm and starting to connect with God at that age, I remember you know what, that was way more fun. Just being in a place of just pure enjoyment and just giving my best, and whatever that looks like on race day is okay. So sometimes a race might not play out the way I wanted to, but if I give it my best, I can still have that original joy I found when I was younger and when I wasn't even a runner, because I was more of a soccer player. So I really, really believe, with that quote you're sharing, that we have such a beautiful sport. It's an incredible, incredible sport. I don't think many things can do what ultra running does for us, and allows us to go through these ups and downs where we see scary things, but then we see just something very powerful in the human spirit to want to keep going, to want to continue, and sometimes walk to the finish and make it. Definitely.
So in yours, when you talk about being stripped down, for you, it was a return to what you experienced when you were younger. I guess before you had all that other baggage of maybe experience or perceptions or whatever. So in that context, if you experience joy, almost a blissful ignorance of joy, would then that joy, you think, be an essence of spirit once the baggage is stripped away? Or would joy have a direct correlation or equation, spirit equals joy?
I think the joy is an overflow of the spiritual interaction, at least for me. It's almost like that's what I get to experience from my connection with God. And the way that I see it is like, now I'm a dad. I have 2 kids now. We have a newborn now, and even when kids are young, like my older son, within a year, he loved when I encouraged him, when I said, you're doing really good, or you're moving well, and you're be able to walk. Like any kind of encouragement, he just found this like kind of joy from it, and I could see him like be lifted up and just honestly just energized by it. And so when I look back at my original passion in running, was like feeling like God was saying, good job, like you're running, you're doing what I intended you to do. You're designed to run. And even if not all of us are like elite runners or the best in the world, like I don't consider myself even like that good. Honestly, there's so many way better runners than me. Like Michael's one of them, right? He crushed me.
Moving on.
Yeah, we'll leave that for later, but I want my rematch. No, but it's like it's this feeling of like, wow, you're doing something so pure and simple, and you have somebody that cares, somebody that is saying you're doing good, and I'm proud of you. And so for me, the joy comes in that experience, and even in the suffering, even when you're going through really difficult patches in a race or in life, and you're still giving your best. There's something beautiful about feeling like, oh, somebody's watching, somebody's like understanding that and empathizes with it. I am, as I'm talking, I'm thinking of a few different races. Like one of them was the first time I did Lake Sonoma. I was in really good shape, and then I got sick leading up to it, and I was like, oh man, this is so frustrating. There's like all these great runners, Jim Walmsley, Tim Frerichs, Jared Hazen, all these guys that are like big names in the sport, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to race this not being at my best. And so I almost didn't race. And in the morning of, I woke up early and I was walking around praying, just trying to decide what to do. And then I'm like, I think I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to start and see what happens. So then I start, and 10 miles in, I feel like I want to drop out. And I'm like, I just want to drop out. And then I'm like, no, what does God think of this? How does he see this race? And then I just started focusing on that. And a couple miles in, I just stopped caring about what place I was, and just started focusing like, okay, well, what's the best that I have today? What can my body give while I'm sick? And so I just kept going and going. And then like mile 23, I was in 5th all of a sudden. And then like 26, I moved up to 4th. And then it was like, oh, like then I heard I was catching number 3, and then it was like, oh, why not like see if I can catch, get on the podium. And it didn't happen till the very end, but I actually squeezed onto the podium that day, and I was shocked. I was like, there's no way. Like I could not believe that, with how horrible I felt. And then I remembered like, oh man, what was so powerful about that was that I just felt that God was proud. Like I just felt like he was like, this is the best you have today. How, like, I'm so proud of that, like nobody may ever understand how hard you push today, but I do. And that's kind of what I mean for me. That original joy is like, the joy is almost the overflow of feeling that spiritual presence and that kind of uplifting encouragement of like, good job, you're doing your best. And I try to carry that in all aspects of what I do, because so many times I think, like in ministry that I work in, a lot of people don't see what you're really doing, and so you have to believe that there will be fruit from it. Like somehow things will will work out, and you just focus on what is your best, what's your best effort, and how you honor that.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Sabrina and Michael, any comments there? Do you want me to put out the next one?
Well, one thing that is something that you said earlier, Mario, that I really liked was you were talking about just the joy coming, like the sources within, rather than, whatever happens is not rooted in outcomes or anything. And I was just thinking of like, that's how Thomas Aquinas defines it. He defines like joy as a consequence of love, and it's something that is internal to an action, and so it's like rooted in your purpose. And so whereas happiness, like happy, sad feelings come and go due to external causes, joy is something that you can firmly hold even through the ups and downs, because it's something that is connected to your love and rooted in your purpose through.
That's awesome. Perfect. She explained it much quicker than I
did. All right. Next one. This one coming straight or ascribed to the Buddha. Michael, you can tell me whether that's not accurate, whether the Buddha didn't actually say this, or maybe we messed up the translation. Don't pray for lighter burdens, but for stronger backs. So each of you has intentionally sought out and into the depths of endurance. Does, and if so, how does that reflect on your chosen spiritual path, if not religion? And Mario, as we go, if you think about that, no certain order here, feel free to
I feel like a lot of these questions warrant like a second, like.
Yeah, totally.
Can you
say it again?
Yeah.
Second reading, is that what you said?
Yeah,
fair. So don't pray for lighter burdens, but for stronger backs. And then my follow-up or a point of discussion, each of you has intentionally sought out and into the depths of endurance. You've all chosen events or efforts or distances or courses that are tough. And I guess that's a relative thing. I mean, ultimately it's play, and we're all just grateful to be out there and pay to do it. And it's short-lived on the grand scheme of things. But as far as athletics go, you're all choosing some pretty tough events or efforts. So how does, so let me see, I'm good. So does, and if so, how does that reflect on your chosen spiritual path, if not religion?
Yeah, I'm seeing how they both of those sides of questions tie into each other. I do think that even, for me, even if that's a quote that is from Buddha, I think it's a great analogy too for somebody who's Christian, because we are trying to be tougher, to grow, to mature, to be stronger. And I think there's a beauty of suffering and learning to suffer that connects us with who Christ is and his suffering. So when I choose races, I am trying to choose some that are going to test me, right? Because like I was drawn to Hellgate because I read some blogs and stuff and just heard it was awful. So I was like, why not? Like, why? have this rule that I can only do races 3 times. So there's some that I have hit that limit where I've hit that 3 mark limit and I can't go back. And so I was like, why not go to this crazy race and run through the night and go through technical terrain and all this stuff. So I think there is a draw to that for me. Like I really feel like it gives me a different perspective that suffering isn't necessarily a bad thing. And you know, I've had some people that'll say, well, it's not suffering, it's like, you know, calculated miscomfort kind of thing. And I see the point. I think it's a valid point, but I think sometimes it is suffering. I don't know. Like sometimes it gets really, really tough. And I think there are times where it does connect to you know, the beauty that I saw in who Jesus is and what he, you know, suffered on the cross, and just all the people that have suffered in scriptures that I read, and the disciples, and the difficulties that they went through, yet it produced so much life, and not just so much life around them, but even life that it's bringing to me, because I'm inspired by it. So I'm drawn to that. I really am. And I try not to go over the top. Like, you know, I'm not going to sign up for like Cocodona 250 yet, but you never know. Or like, I think I saw Michael was going to do the Barkley, right? You maybe have talked about that, but I was like, I don't think I want to do the Barkley. That's a little too much for me, but you know, just something that is going to test me, and that it's going to give me a challenge and continually push me to be better, to be a better person, to see life differently, and connect spiritually.
And
I also think like the races, kind of dovetailing what Mara was saying, like when you're in those scenarios of a race, like first of all, it's in nature, and I think that right there is like a huge thing. Like whatever spirituality or religion you believe in, I think nature is super important. So I think we're all kind of getting back to basics in that way, and that's the best thing to be surrounded by, to have like a spiritual moment. But I think the races kind of help expedite the spiritual experience, because you are suffering or going through all these emotions, and you are having to kind of like, you know, it's where the rubber hits the road, as far as like whether you've been praying or meditating or whatever religion you're practicing. Like I feel like we all draw on those practices when things get really tough, and I feel like if you've done your homework as far as spiritual homework, like you do, your mind does shift into those lanes pretty quickly when things get really tough. And I think that's kind of like a very streamlined way to kind of expedite, not that we're looking to expedite the spiritual experience, but to maybe gain more knowledge about what we're kind of internally seeking. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely edifying. When I think of, so when you read that quote, I was like, oh man, okay, so you can eat, so don't pray for a lighter load, pray for a stronger back. My first thought was like, why can't I pray for both? Which I guess shows kind of like the contradictions in our persons. Cause yeah, like you sign up for like the biggest, hardest race, and then you're like, oh, I hope it's like not rainy, and also like a pretty smooth day, and also like that you can be the best version of yourself. But yeah, it's funny that, I don't know, just like so many contradictions I'm realizing that I have in myself toward these things. But I think it's kind of like part of the draw of those big, really hard events is this kind of curiosity, like of, you know, what will happen in those moments, and are you that strong, and are you capable? But I think like in actually executing those, like the plan and seeing yourself through, trying to get to the finish line. I mean, I personally draw on like strength through my faith. And I agree with Michael, like you draw on your spiritual practices and they're something that helps you get to the end.
So something I tried to just retain the quote, but I lost it, but something that you had just said, Sabrina. So if there is an association or an affiliation with what we're all doing or what you're doing with these endurance events and spirituality, and it's a test of sorts, do you think that there's some element of worthiness? You're choosing these long events, which you were just talking about, Sabrina, and this certain test, and are you up to it? Like it's this unknown. So you think that there's an element of you deciding on whether you're worthy to finish the race. And then if there's a direct correlation between what we're doing in endurance and spirituality, is there some element of casting yourself or the decision of whether you're worthy spiritually?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So personally, I disconnect those things insofar as like, if I am looking for completing a race to fill my cup or to tell me that I'm enough in some way, then I've already lost the game. Like I've won enough races at this point and lost enough races where like I know that I'm the same person the next day, no matter what. And there are also always more races. And so it's like, if you're looking to show yourself sufficient in some way, well, there are always other races in the future. And so it'll be a never ending battle.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's a sort of, I don't know, like a sort of testing grounds that happens, or just like, I don't know, like you put in all this training, you put in all this time and effort, and then you see where it's brought you. But I guess the difference is I disconnect like sufficiency from am I further along fitness wise and internal strength and everything.
And so for you, Michael, in terms of working through maybe elements of Buddhism, where there's some level of improvement or transcending or moving through to a different level, and whether that could be a microcosm in a race or in the larger scope of things. I mean, do you think that oh man, I just lost my train of thought. I'm thinking of a question in the moment, and I was really excited to see what you thought in terms of the Buddhism playing in there and the different elevations or stages, but I just lost the question. Poof, gone as I was trying to frame it. Maybe I'll come back to it, but all right. I'm going to keep us moving. I'm going to move to the next one. All right. So in the wild struggle for existence, we want to have something that endures. And so we will fill our minds with rubbish and facts in the silly hope of keeping our place. A quote from Oscar Wilde. And so I'll say it again. In the wild struggle for existence, we want to have something that endures. And so we fill our minds with rubbish and facts in the silly hope of keeping our place. And then my follow-up there, most religions would look at fitness and endurance as core tenets versus just time fillers or efforts in personal glorification. Ultra running also seems to concurrently offer transcendentalism or outside of the physical realm, while also being very grounded in the moment and place. Can each of you comment on the fusion between place and experience as felt in a spiritual way? And you've mentioned this, referred to it, Michael, and it's come up, I think, as a common thread as well in terms of being in the outdoors and very much immersed in the environment. But it also seems to have a very emotional, if not spiritual, transcendence to what you're all doing or moving into a different place. So it's this simultaneous kind of straddling of being very present in the moment and being very present in an environment, in a forest, on a trail, in that perception, while kind of spiritually transcending some level. If it could be suffering, it could be levels of joy, it could be feelings about yourself or joy. So whether that stirs any reactions in you or comments or experiences. And if some of these get too abstract, we don't have to dwell on it either. I can move to something that would be more concrete, but.
These are tough questions.
I think one initial thought is just, I think in our daily lives, or at least as things are now, it's really easy to forget you're embodied because you spend all of your time on your computer and like communicating via web. And I don't know, you just feel like a floating mind. And then actually going outside and submerging yourself in nature, it's a kind of like, it has this kind of humanizing feeling where you remember that you're embodied. And also like, I don't know, you talked about transcendentalism, the kind of rising above. It's kind of like once you are, I don't know, affirmed in your humanity or something, there's something to, I mean, so we talk about it in terms of natural theology in the Christian tradition, but just seeing the beauty of nature and just the majesty of like everything outside, which like our world is amazing, and seeing those things, like beauty always lifts you. It has like a lifting effect of you. So yeah, that's like you're embodied, and then also there's like this second stage in which you're like, I don't know, drawn to think of things higher than yourself.
I wasn't thinking of it in this moment or prior. I'm just thinking of it in this moment, but I'll relay it because I guess it does actually the question. And hearing you speak, Sabrina, it made me think of, I guess, a very real experience of my own in this space. So for years, I put on some of the early races that I put on. And for years, I tried to think of an appropriate name for what would be a formalized event business or an event company. And I wanted it to be meaningful. I didn't want it to necessarily be whimsical, and I didn't want to rush or force it. And so I went for years without having it its own designated like corporation because I didn't want to choose just a name that didn't have that meaning for me. And so I used to live a bit outside of Ithaca, and I used to occasionally do a run commute in, and it was this beautiful run commute that basically went down through the Cayuga Trails course. So Sabrina and Mario, you've both run there. So it went down through Treeman, and then I hooked up through Lick Brook, that kind of steep climb. And then I cross over some railroad tracks and head in on another pathway that basically emerged like a half mile from downtown where my shop was at the time. And one of these mornings, I think it was like a summer morning, it had rained pretty hard overnight. The ground was still really, I think, warm, but it was a cool morning. And I was cruising through the section, which is a little bit off course at Upper Treeman, which is this old growth forest. And there's sections of still old growth stands that still stand around the course there. And I was heading through, and it's a old enough canopy where there's not a lot of ground cover. There's some ferns, but it's some pretty otherwise pine needles, fairly soft. Trail goes through, beautiful. And the rays of sun were really just coming through the canopy, and they were hitting the ferns on the ground and interlacing like the forest. And you had the mist coming up or the steam coming up from the forest floor. The sun you could feel the heat as the sun was coming on. And as I was going, there are certain sections of trails in there where the red Fs, or as I inappropriately call them, the newts, because it has a better flow to it. There are certain sections of the trail where the newts will really come out, and they'll be interlacing the trails. And so you have to be really mindful in that moment of not stepping on or squashing these red Fs or the newts. And so for me, that became the embodiment of what I look for out there and what I appreciate and what I celebrate and what I wanted my events to celebrate. Was it basically took these red Fs, or because red newt flowed better than red F, that it took them to make me mindful of the full experience of that place and in that moment, and why I love being out there and in those moments. So it was this very, I guess, spiritual moment or emotional moment for me, but it was very much anchored in and appreciating in that very physical space with these very physical creatures that I was sharing the trail with. It took them to make me mindful and to tie all that together. So that's where Red Newt Racing came from in name. And so maybe that would be an example of kind of what, even though it's not religious, a spiritual moment, but very much straddling that line with the experience and anchor of the place.
I love it. The other day, I saw a friend that had a tattoo on their arm, and it said be present. That's all it said, be present. And it was a theme that I've kind of been really working on in my life, just being really present in all aspects, not just in nature, because nature for me is a really easy one. That one, like, I love, and it feels very natural to me, but trying to be more present when I'm around people, when I'm around my family, when I'm around my kids and my wife. And I think, like, as you were sharing the quote and sharing your story, that's kind of what I thought of, like, when I'm in nature and I'm in my element and I'm very present, I'm able to go to these places that are very spiritual while I'm present. So it's kind of like you're getting both at the same time. I'm getting both, like, the full experience. I'm seeing the beauty. I'm seeing the water, the waterfalls, the lakes, the mountains. I'm soaking it in, and yet it points to something much bigger, much more beautiful than that. Kind of like what Sabrina was sharing. For me, like, definitely see an artist. I see a creator. I see something so beautiful in some of these places, even in deserts that I'm not a huge fan of, even like in deserts and places with not a lot of water. I'm like, man, there's something beautiful here too. And there's something cool about our sport, that we can really, really get to experience a place on foot, naturally, something very simple. And how many times for all of us, I think, when we go somewhere new, we travel on a vacation, and the first day we might not know the place, but then we run out on the trails 2 to 3 days later, you just start getting so connected. You get so deeply connected to that place, and you feel like it maybe more than some people that have been there for years, that have never explored. And so I believe, I know I'm biased, but we have such a beautiful sport. It's just so fantastic to feel our feet, connecting to the ground and moving and doing something that we were born to do.
All right, Michael, you want to weigh in, or do you want me to jump to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what they're saying. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I got two more here, just so you guys know what I have in the lineup here. If God sends us on strong paths, we are provided strong shoes. From Corey Ten Boom. Probably mispronounced their name rather. But if God sends us on strong paths, we are provided strong shoes. And then my follow-up, much like strong shoes, what experiences or mental callings shaped your spiritual foundation? And that could be something historical. It could be a time of life, or it could be, you can look at it right now, in experiences that are continuing to shape your foundation and creating that strong shoes or foundation.
I do believe that the journeys that we're called to go through in life and endure, that we're built with the tools to get through it. I do believe that, even the ones that we choose, I do think that. And you don't necessarily find the success right away, though. Like, there's a lot of humbling, a lot of learning. So it's like, eventually you can get through it, but not maybe on the first try. And I think that's part of the beauty, though. It's like, when you really believe in something, the first failure won't necessarily keep you away. You'll learn from it, and it won't, it might actually make you stronger and get you a step closer to completing the journey. So yeah, I love some of those quotes, even though maybe they're not necessarily from the Bible, but the ones that, you know, say like there's no such thing as failure. You always learn from everything. And I believe some of that. Like, I believe that with the right attitude and a humble spirit, like even the times that you don't do what you want to do, and you're even embarrassed of how you did, you can still learn, you know, you can still grow. And I think that it is a combination of, like, we're built to be able to endure, and we also have to have some of that I don't know what you call it, like kind of desire and strong will.
It's funny, you almost just you paraphrase it, but you almost said the quote without saying the quote, and it was a quote that I didn't include in the lineup here, but one that I thought about. It's a quote from Drew Barrymore, the actress who has had her share of life experiences.
Yeah.
Her quote was, "If you're going to go through hell, you better at least if you're going to go through hell, you better at least learn something from it."
Yeah.
And so you basically just kind of alluded to that.
There you go.
But for Sabrina and Michael, any similar to, you know, and I guess these would be the parallels in racing and training in terms of your experiences, both mental, physical. Mario, you referenced failures. It would be all of that creates a certain level of a foundation, but any experiences in your lives that created the spiritual foundation or put you in the spiritual path or the place that you're in now?
For me, like hitting rock bottom and then having to rebuild methodically. And to me, that's when I got really into meditation and stuff, and because it helped me deal with just the internal feelings and being present. And so I kind of took refuge in the present moment. And so, yeah, I mean, it's type of thing. Once you've built up and you're far enough away from rock bottom, then you're like, man, I'm glad I hit rock bottom, because I've rebuilt in a way that I would never have been able to do otherwise. So, and then that kind of dovetails into the running in obvious ways.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Which creates a pretty strong motivator and a pretty strong, I guess, foundation in that sense.
My thought upon hearing the original quote was like, okay, so what? It's, if God gives you a hard journey, then he'll give you hard shoes. Like, my first thought in hearing that is like, there's a suppressed premise, like the hard journey that you think was given to you by God is really from God. Because I think one of the errors that I make is like thinking that I am committed to something that's like what God has for me, but actually it's not something that I should be committed to. So I think, like, one of the things we talked about with perseverance is making sure that you're persevering to some worthwhile goal. And like, what if it's not a worthwhile goal? Maybe it's something that you shouldn't be like just so committed to, that is not like the path that you should be doing. And I think like to a superficial degree, I spent a long time trying to become a really good like mountain runner, when really my gait, everything about me says I'm a road runner and should like probably commit myself to like long road races. But I kept like, you know, you become intransigent, you become like committed to these goals and will persevere to try to achieve things, when really, if you just step back and listen better and like take those times of like reflecting, you would realize like, oh, actually, this isn't the journey that God had for me. And if I listen better, like, and that's why I don't have like the good shoes or whatever, however the quote goes.
Strong shoes.
Strong shoes.
Strong shoes, which is an interesting way to refer to shoes. But I think we get what Corey was saying there. Maybe that could be a translation thing too. Yeah. Okay. Last one that I had here. So perseverance is more than endurance. It is endurance combined with absolute assurance and certainty that what we are looking for is going to happen. And there's Oswald Chambers. So perseverance is more than endurance. It is endurance combined with absolute assurance and certainty that what we are looking for is going to happen. And then my follow-up. You are all elite endurance athletes, but with varied backgrounds and sets of experiences. Some preeminent exercise physiologists and coaches have alluded to a central pillar, if not necessity, for elite athletes or athleticism is a full belief in self. Yet with ultra running, we all know that there are no assurances that any number of things can and will go wrong out there. What do you use to quell the doubts, to assure yourself that you got this? And is that largely intrinsic, or do you feel it's shaped by a higher power or an extrinsic entity? And let me know if you want me to read that again.
I think it's a learning process. Like, as far as the doubt, like when you think about the doubts that you had when you first start, as opposed to now, but I guess that's ties into perseverance. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud. You know, just like
yeah, by all means, yeah, because I know these are kind
thought
of
bubbles that.
Yep, thought bubbles are good.
Could be incoherent.
So. But you're in the moment. You're
right.
acknowledging your thought bubbles. Mm-hmm. So I'll just read it again so you guys can, as you continue to form a thought about it. You are all elite endurance athletes, but with varied backgrounds and sets of experiences. Some preeminent exercise physiologists and coaches have alluded to a central pillar being the necessity or it being necessary for elite athletes in that the belief, having a belief in self. Yet with ultra running, we all know that there are no assurances and that any number of things can and will go wrong out there. What do you use to quell those doubts, to assure yourself that you got this? And is that largely intrinsic, or do you feel it's shaped by a higher power or extrinsic entity?
So I have two thoughts. One about like the direct quote, and then one about that second part about assuring yourself. So starting with assuring yourself, I think if you're not assured, then you're not going to get to the finish line, right? Because it's a kind of cop out, like, well, I'm not sure I can do it. Well, there are going to be so many moments where you become convinced that, like, yeah, I can't do it. And if you're not set on completing the task, you are not going to complete the task. And so I think one way in which I maintain my commitment, like, first of all, I tell other people what my goal is so that I'm accountable to other people. And that, I mean, that's like a spiritual practice as well, like bringing other people in and telling them. But then also when you're in the race and your emotions shout at you, you have to shout back and say, like, no, because your emotions always shout at you when you're running. They're not quiet. And reasons to quit will present themselves, if not more logically compelling, certainly louder when you are in those moments of weakness. And so maintaining your assurance is something that is just, it's like a continual recommitment that happens throughout the act of persevering. But then I guess returning to the Oswald Chambers quote at the beginning about the assurance that's present in perseverance, the context in which he says that quote is about like the perseverance of faith. And so in the Christian context, there is assurance because you have like hope in this one person. And so the hope is not placed in yourself. And so like completing an ultra race is kind of like a weak analogy for like the race of faith, because the hope is placed in yourself instead of in this infallible person. And you're like bound to let yourself down at some point. And so I would say I have imperfect assurance in my ability to complete anything that I stand on the line and set out to do. But there are ways of making it more likely. And that's like, yell at yourself when you want to quit and tell other people that you're definitely going to finish so that they hold you accountable and things like that.
Can you occasionally yell at yourself out loud during races? Because I think that would be fun for other people around you. If Sabrina becomes this crazy woman that's out there, she just keeps yelling at herself. Yeah.
Someday.
Someday you'll get there. If you, yeah, and your transition, she transitioned to just doing just straight long road races, and then she just kind of started yelling at herself, and we're just losing her. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of, when I heard the first quote you read, I was like, yeah, I agree that perseverance is more than endurance. I do think that. But for me, I guess is not necessarily assurance that I'm going to get to the finish line. It's more of an assurance that my effort will be blessed, if that makes sense. Like my effort will get somewhere somehow, even if it's not that day. That something good will happen from it, that God will honor it somehow. Because I think of like even in some of the strongest Christian moments, it didn't look like victory. It didn't look like they made it to the finish line, but yet over time, it unraveled and people realized what actually happened that day. That perseverance was inspiring for people around them. And overall, like early in the church days, other people in the church were inspired by these efforts that the pillars, the people were giving. And so I think of it for my eyes or my terms is that even if I'm not exactly in the place God wants me to be, if I am doing it from the right heart and the right spirit, he's gonna do something good with it. And I think what's been neat for me is even the times that I thought I kind of screwed up, somehow God did something good with it. And I had no idea till later on. And so, yeah, so I don't fully agree with that whole quote. I think I agree with perseverance being more than endurance, because I do think that, but not necessarily you must fully know you're getting to the finish line. Because I've made it to the finish line at times when I didn't think I could, and then other times I didn't make it. And yet I think it was still a successful day. I still gave the best I had that day, and something good happened. And those efforts that seem kind of solo efforts or about me, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are for other people. Like I was thinking about, I broke the 50K record and then the 100K, and then I failed in the 100 mile. I had to drop at like 70. so I didn't hit that one, but we still got a grant for all the kids, and there was a lot of cool stuff that happened from it. So like I failed, I didn't get to the finish line, but I tried my best, and it teaches me in other aspects of life that are much more important than running, that I have to believe because of my faith. And I want to believe, not just have to, but I want to believe that something more will happen, something bigger, and something just more beautiful, more important than just myself will come out of it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if I was rambling.
I think it has. And I think that not that it's necessarily not that it was phrased as a question, and not that it was looking for an answer or a response, but my reaction was yes, and it already has. I think for all of you in what you're all doing in your respective avenues or lanes or pursuits. I mean, Mario, to your point, yes, something much larger came out of that effort. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty amazing. And Sabrina, the amount of people that you've touched along the way with your writings and connections, and Michael, I've been really inspired in the short amount of time that I've known you, just a few months, in terms of your own path and where you're headed from here, and just being inspired by your kind of mental framework and pathways. I think that the butterfly effects in the larger community, I think, are pretty powerful and very real. So that was my reaction to what you just said, Mario, and I think that goes for all of you.
Yeah. Like I'm fully aware, like running can be a very selfish sport, I'm fully aware of that. But if it's kind of teaching us something greater, like it can have greater impact in what we do, in our lives, because we're obviously like we're gonna retire from elite professional running, and really do more maybe fun running but I think like the lessons that we're taking can be worth it, because I have gotten into those places in my life where I'm like, all right, I'm getting older. Is it time to be done? Like can I still justify being away from my family for a couple hours a day, so good questions. I wrestle with that kind of stuff a lot. Yeah.
Are there any other elements, and to be respectful of all your times, I really enjoy this. I wish I had another 10 questions and I could just dig into you guys for another hour, and maybe there'd be a round two, because I don't know. I think this stuff's fun to think about. But in the moment, and it's okay if not, but anything else that would be fun, or questions for each other, or something, or comments on the topic of spirituality or religion and ultra?
I love hearing other people's perspectives and ideas and what makes them tick. So it's been really cool to kind of hear Sabrina's and Mario's, viewpoints. And I think it's super valuable. Everybody's opinion is super valuable. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely learned from all three of you. So thanks so much.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you all as well. If it sits and it still was kind of fun, again, maybe we can circle back, I don't know, next year, and we'll do a round two or some sort of larger thing, or I don't know, maybe in some grand connection of the world, we'll all go for a nice long run or walk together. Though, Sabrina, I don't think I want to do roads. So if we can just do
yeah, that's true. When you have your spouts for trail and you just got to get on the trail, then you can follow.
But thank you for all of sharing some of your time tonight. Thanks for sharing of yourselves and your perspectives. And I'm just grateful for the time together. Thank you all. And I'm looking forward to the next time that we can each or collectively connect.
I want to say I'm sorry I was late, and just I am excited to listen to what you guys had to share, and I admire all of you. So thank you for all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Next time with your Protestant work ethic, you should really be on time for things.
Yeah, exactly.
But hopefully it was good practice and the kids are solid.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Definitely. All right. I will see you all later.
Bye.
See ya.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
So thank you to all of you who have joined either in the moment for this round of the Trails Collective live session. I really enjoyed that time. I'm grateful to all of you who tune in, who listen to this after the fact, who comment, who share it in your own networks, who share it as a podcast, and then who step up to support the Trails Collective and the connections we're trying to make here. So I am grateful for this moment, and I will catch up with you all next week. And until then, see ya.